So this is a collaboration between Adeline and myself. And the whole idea came about because we wanted to do something regarding the pandemic. The word courage and anxiety comes from the reflection of the people around us and what we know. The word anxiety actually means the uncertainty and the fear of what's going to come and when will this end. And we believe that courage and anxiety are two words that coexist with each other, because without fear, there is no courage. So the skeleton of the sculpture is made of steel. To me, it's very strong because it can withstand the weather, especially placing in a public space over a long period of time. So steel being very hard, cold, and very, very strong against the tactile play of the threaded material that's being wrapped around by Adeline. I love this opposing play because to me it is a very metaphorical representation of the words courage and then anxiety. So there are two sides to the sculpture, and the side of courage is our favorite side because I love the way that Adeline uses the colors of the blue, green, and yellow hues that's interlaid between the sculptures. And it gives a very iridescent look because at any point that you look at it, you walk around a sculpture of courage, you can see that it actually comes to life. So it gives a very holographic effect, as if it was actually moving.
The work itself was inspired by the text from Alvin Pang publication, What Give Us Our Name, and the specific statement was every seed carries within it the dream and the blueprint of the whole. And this statement, speaks the whole transformational journey that we went through in our life. How every single human beings, whether it's children, whether it's working adults, whether it's families, each of them have this innate potential inside of them waiting to be realized.
So with regards to the design process, what we did was to actually come up with sketches, during which we realized that we want to use the material rattan. It was really interesting because it's very hard to get materials outside with stores being closed during COVID. We went around parks and roadsides to actually pick up wooden twigs and everything and just try to come up with the mock-up.
The seed pot that we designed, is meant for people to come together, whether it's children, whether it's family, or even working adults, to really contemplate and meditate, what's truly important for them, what are their deepest dreams, and how they can, self-actualize that.
So distance brings me closer to you is a word which is ironic. As we know, distance does not normally bring people closer. But for me, it's more of a word which makes people question about the complexity of human relationships. Well, I think the text had to be something familiar, easy to understand, because we are appealing to the masses in a public space. But second of all, it had to have that slight unfamiliarity as well, so that you would have that second look and wonder, is this a public message or is it a piece of art? So I guess it was quite deliberate to have that slight twist or irony, that distance is something that normally brings people further away, but in this case it brings people closer. It's definitely a privilege to be able to work on public space because you have a huge uninvited audience. Unlike in a gallery or in a museum where people need to pay to actually see your work. But over here, you can surprise all kinds of people because it's a public space.
Tian in essence means between time, between space. It is an idiomatic sculpture to translate the idea of pausing and transiting through spaces. It's a composite of two characters, Men for door and Ru for day or sun. In Japanese philosophy, the same kanji character denotes negative space. So in setting apart the two characters, Men and Ru, I hope to bring attention not just to the obvious physical form of the work, but also to the less obvious and often neglected in-between negative space. After the 80s, we learned Mandarin in the simplified version, so some people would have asked, why is this character rendered in a traditional form? And what I was actually interested in the traditional form is that its layered complexity, which kind of reflects our situation during COVID. It's not, straightforward. It's really complex what we're dealing with and all that. So I felt it was a good reflection of it. I felt that the iterative process and interaction with the audience makes the artwork part of the community. And I feel that it's something that public art allows for this process. Somehow the work is not just your own, and it's also interesting how it can be transformative and how it can incite a curiosity or offer unexpected encounters. It's almost like the artwork takes a life of its own, and one has to just learn to let go.
So during our first lockdown, I decided to paint a bird every day, and I found out about the barn swallow, which is a champion migrator, and I thought that they really represented how we feel, dreaming about travel, but we're moored in place. If you walk through Sentul Bridge and you come out the other side, on the east side of the waterway, you'll be able to see the barn swallow very clearly, but across the waterway, you can see the Pacific swallow. And they're both fluttering in the wind, and according to how the wind is blowing, they might be looking longingly at each other from across the body of water. That sort of represents how we're feeling. We're fluttering, but we're not quite able to fly yet, and we're still moored in place. That kind of energy that we have, but yet not being able to act on it, that's such a strong symbol, I think, symbolized by the flags, forever fluttering but never flying.
The text of the 14 lines in the art piece are an adaptation of a poem I had written many years ago. The central metaphor of the poem is the barn swallow, which is the most legendary migrating bird in the world. It was also about personal history. My own grandfather was a migrant from overseas who came to Singapore many years ago in hopes of a better life. The idea is that everyone who reads the poem should be thinking about their own personal histories, where they have come from, what community they are in, and where they can draw strength to carry on and to move forward. And Singapore, we're just a society that's full of people who have come from elsewhere originally, and I think it's a lovely way for us to reflect upon that.
Temporary escapism, the process for the pieces, came about during Circuit Breaker. That was the time when I looked inward a lot, and I wanted to reconnect with the spaces again and imagine how it would be like to be outside and meet up with friends. When I thought about making these works, it was to welcome people back into those spaces and think about how we could use these spaces and have it be like before, because no doubt it's changed a lot, but I wanted these works to kind of ease us into this new reality. What I found was that post-Circuit Breaker, when we could see our friends again, some of us felt this sense of social awkwardness, and it doesn't help that some of us also find it difficult to have or start conversations with strangers or anybody else. So the Icebreaker series was created so that it would encourage us to have conversations with one another in a public space, much like that bench, overlooking that great view. Steady lie is a very personal one for me because it is a phrase that my best friend and I share. Whenever we paint and I'll come to a point where I feel like it's an obstacle I can't get over at that point, she will be so encouraging and say, "Steady lie, you can one, and so that pushed me to go more, and I thought to encapsulate that into this very happy, positive mural to show that we got this, we can do this.
Our artwork Yellow is actually based on a Robert Yeo's poetry called Those in Urban Yellow. His text speaks about how the younger generation nowadays tend to look for greener grass outside of Singapore, but he wants us to, in fact, appreciate what we already have around us locally. To us, yellow is a very happy color. It's warm, it's vibrant at the same time. When this happened during the Circuit Breaker, we thought to instill yellow in this bridge where there's a lot of heavy people traffic, we can bring warmth and happiness to the public in these hard times.
We made sure that when we conceptualize this artwork, we actually think about what sunrise do to the artwork and to the people who actually use the bridge at different time of the days. They get a different experience, and I thought that will value add to their overall park going experience and activities that they do in the park.
Over at the Public Art Trust, we aspire to cultivate a larger pool of entrants into the field of public art, be it creatives, site owners who are keen to have public art on their grounds, or advocates and supporters who believe in the meaning and impact of having art in public spaces. In terms of outreach programs for Rewritten, we have worked with numerous organizations such as grassroots and institutional ones. We see each commissioning project as an opportunity to touch and educate the minds of our community, to grow an enduring curiosity towards art and public art in general, and to view the world through a more critical lens.
Through Rewritten, our parks became a big canvas where our artists come together to imagine and to create. As the processes are highly collaborative, artists have to consider diverse perspectives in order to apply their craft. And in the long run, programs like this will enable artists to develop greater versatility in their artistic journeys.